Andy Whitesitt will now wrap up this year's member conference with a look at the future of our industry. And Andy is Vice President of Business Development and Customer Service for ACES. He does a great job. Thank you, Andy, for that. Andy joined ACES in 2003 and has held various positions in power and natural gas, most recently as Vice President of Natural Gas and Fuels. He leads the development of new member and customer business for ACES and is responsible for ensuring service quality. Andy's going to be concluding this year's conference with a discussion on what the future holds for the energy industry and his thoughts on where we go from there. And after that, Andy, it's your job to close the conference with a final ACES. Thank you. And Mike, what have I got?
Were you supposed to announce that?
Let me see that.
Gift card winner.
I can't read that from here.
Okay.
Okay, the gift card winner, we did. We announced that.
I missed it.
You missed it, Mike. That's okay.
I was saying hi to Brad.
That's okay. So we are here. Andy, it's your time. You get to close us out. Please turn out the lights and lock the door when you're done. So thanks, Andy.
Thank you, Don. Getting off script. Thank you all for sticking around. Don actually said if you stuck around, I could give away an F-150 electric truck. So y'all are part of a good group here. Maybe next year. We'll put that on there. Really appreciate you all showing up. It's been an absolute pleasure over the last couple days to see people face-to-face again. I'm a face-to-face person. I finally signed up for a Zoom account. I'm probably not going to use it, so if you want to talk to me, I'd be glad to come visit you. But it's been great to see everybody. People talked about the challenges with traveling and that sort of thing, and I'm just out of practice on talking and eating and drinking all night and then getting no sleep, so I imagine many of you are in the same boat. We do have, over the past 2 days, representatives from 21 of ACES members for the most part here. And in addition, we have representatives from about 15 of ACES core customers here as well, and those range from cooperatives, municipals, other public power, and some private equity investment funds, independent power producers, developers, that sort of thing. So thank you, members of ACES, for welcoming those customers as well to the event, and just really appreciate everybody showing up. For those of you who couldn't make it or had other challenges who joined us online, thank you for those as well. I know across everybody we've got a very good attendance, so I'm glad to see that we're out networking and meeting again and eating and drinking and shaking hands, and hopefully this is the start of that. So just before I get rolling here and tell you, kind of what the future is going to look like, give yourselves a hand of applause for showing up. Appreciate it. Thank you. Thank you. And ACES is appreciative of it, but from talking to y'all, I know that you guys are appreciative of it too, because you guys are talking, networking, and that's, there's something to be said for that. I think it's very important, and we'll continue to do it. So jumping in, I guess I need a clicker here. That'll help. So jumping in, the future of the industry, where do we go from here? So if you were paying attention 2 years ago when we had the last conference, that's the exact same title that I used. Not for anything deep, I'm just lazy and it was easy. So we've got that. As we look forward, and I'll go through some slides here, I want to step back over the last 2 days, and I think if you look at the Robert's presentation yesterday and Zinker's presentation yesterday, you'll get the good bookends of where we are or where we were and where we're going. So if you look at Robert's presentation, he's obviously very passionate about coal, passionate about nuclear, and I know many of you are passionate about coal and nuclear as well, and it's been a very important resource for us in the United States and continues to be important for us. He said that there are obviously challenges with renewables, and there are challenges with renewables, and we know that. So that's not anything new to us. If you look at Mike Zinker's presentation, as NextEra becomes a greener company and he certainly supports that through his presentation and his data and materials. He looks at it and says, coal and nuclear are challenged, and the future is renewable generation, whether that be wind, solar, or whatever technology comes next. And so that's a bit of the other bookend, right? So it hurts to say, these assets don't make sense anymore, and we're going on to new things. So that's probably the other extreme. We are probably somewhere in that transitionary path. And in fact, I know we are, and I know many of you know we are too. We can dig our heels in. I just turned 44 years old. I can't see the menu anymore. The folks I had dinner with know that. My wife wants me to get reader glasses. I can dig my heels in and not buy them, but I'm still going to get old, and I'm still going to need them. And that's kind of where we are in the transition in the energy phase, I think. So if you skip forward to John McDonald's presentation, which I thought was fantastic, it really made you think about how things are going to look in the future. And they are going to look nothing in the future like they look today. And I think that's obvious, and we know that. So as I flip through these slides real quick and kind of summarize what we have heard the last 2 days and where we're going, I think it's important to remember that we are going somewhere. So last time I gave you 3 takeaways. This year I'll give you 2. We had a year of COVID, and I know we're all a little tired, so I don't want to have to take away too much stuff. But we'll click through these real quick. So these first 4 slides are from 2 years ago again, exact same slides. I didn't change anything on them. And as we looked back at that time, we had abundant low-cost natural gas. So it was going to be $3 forever. And I think actually you heard that in the last couple of days, that's still some of the expectation. Renewable pricing was declining. So renewables were getting cheaper. Wind was getting cheaper. Solar was getting cheaper. And it was going to become more abundant. Thus, energy prices were getting lower. So these are prices from around the country, PJM, MISO, California, Texas, and SPP. And this was from 2008 to 2018. Again, these slides are 2 years old. And what we saw at the time was a continual decline in electricity prices across the country because of the abundant natural gas and the abundant renewables impacting the market. And it was going to continue to do so that we lived in an environment of low prices and low volatility. That was the expectation 2 years ago. And in fact, that was the reality 2 years ago, and that is how many people reacted when it came to managing power supply portfolio that we all rely on for electricity. And quite frankly, there were a lot of people that, I was in the gas hedging business for 15 years, and a lot of people in the last 2 years ago said we don't need a hedge because there's plenty of resources and there's not a whole lot of risk. So at the time, here were the risks from 2019. We had these explained to us over the last couple days. Oil driving natural gas production as a byproduct of oil production. Natural gas is basically free down in Texas. Natural gas supply is concentrated. You saw Mike Zinker show the shale map of where the gas comes from in the country. Corporate demand for renewables, and I think at the time what we were talking about was the corporate demand was so strong for renewables, it wasn't about planning for the grid. It was about corporations putting money into renewables so that the renewable growth grew. Of course, obviously, as you just heard from Brad, and we know tax credits were a big part of driving that, but that disrupts the grid, and we've continued to see that as you've seen over the last couple days. Still dependent on weather, and we've got a couple examples where that's going to come out. And then also, what about electricity demand? And we've talked about demand about 1% on average, maybe a little less. We were talking to the folks from outside of Dallas, and that's significantly more down there. We have the potential for electric cars that will increase that. But really, what we're talking about here too is lining up the demand for electricity with the ability for the generation to generate electricity when it's needed. And we've got an example here from California that will show that there are challenges with that sometimes. The other one here to think about as we go forward is we keep talking about electric cars. There are situations, I think, where you're going to see a lot of electric cars coming into the market, and depending on when people plug those in, you could see shifting in your demand for electricity, which would impact, obviously, the generation that you'd have and the ability to match that up. So just, again, looking backwards here at last year, 2020, before I mention that, I did not have on top risks from 2019 a global pandemic, the shutdown of the world, the collapse of the crude oil, market crash, market recovery, and a toilet paper shortage. So we didn't have any of that stuff, and it all happened. I think the takeaway is there are risks out there, and you've heard this the last couple of days, that are unknown. There are things that you can do to mitigate those risks, and if you prepare for those risks, and it was talked about on the panel here this morning, if you prepare for those risks, then when they arrive, you at least have something ready instead of being caught off guard, having to respond in real time, which can be very damaging. So looking back, just to cover what I just said, crude oil prices plunged during the pandemic, obviously from a lack of need globally as we all stopped driving around. This doesn't show it, but cash prices for crude oil actually went to like negative $30 a barrel. So volatility, of course. We talked about the impact of natural gas production from crude oil prices. When crude oil crashed, natural gas production came off because we get gas from crude oil. And as a result, natural gas prices went up. Now this is again the Henry Hub price. That doesn't look like much of an incline, but when you go from $2, and it's been $2 for a while at that point, and then it increases to $3, that's a 50% increase. That's not insignificant. And again, this is just the Henry Hub natural gas price. This doesn't account for what's going on at your specific locations around the world or around the country. We're not quite around the world just yet, but we're getting closer. And renewable growth remains strong. 20 gigawatts of wind and solar. Of course, gas is keeping up too with 10 gigawatts that were planned for 2020. And we continue to see a push for renewables. At the same time, we still have a significant amount of coal generation operating in the United States. Now, we retired almost 100,000 gigawatts of coal in the last decade, so it's not been insignificant. But at the same time, we still have a lot left. Unfortunately, from most of the analysis that we see and most of the people that we talk to, a lot of that is expected, another 100,000 gigawatts or so, is expected to be retired by 2030. So in the next decade, we're going to see a lot more of that. But while we still have the coal, while we still have low-priced natural gas, while we still have renewables at a huge growth, we've had relatively low unvolatile power prices, and this is just 2019, 2020. Of course, ERCOT jumped up there in the summer of 19, and we'll talk about ERCOT more recently here in an example. And then you also have the weather. Now, this particular chart shows that it's sunny in the southwestern part of the country, which is best for solar, and it's windy in the mid-continent, which is best for wind. So it's challenging to put solar in Indiana, and it's challenging to put wind in Tennessee, but people are doing it. But the other thing, too, is that weather patterns, on one hand, seem to become more volatile for whatever reason. We're not going to get into that. But at the other hand, while, like we talked about, the cold in Texas might not have been, a 1 in 100 event. I mean, it's been cold there before. With the changing resource mix, which is what is most important in this discussion, what we've heard over the last couple of days, with the changing resource mix, there's an opportunity for more volatility and more challenges around managing power supply going forward. So this is the four-person teeter-totter, and so we're going to be balancing natural gas, renewables, weather, and that demand that I was talking about, not just overall growth of demand, but the intermittency or the lack of a traditional demand curve that we've seen. We put these slides together yesterday or day before, and this teeter-totter was discontinued, and I presume, and I'm just guessing, I don't want any lawsuit here, I presume it's because some kid fell off of it and hurt himself. So you can see how delicate that balance is there. I thought it was a good representation of what we're going to deal with going forward. So I've got two examples here. This is the West Coast Extreme event from August of 2020 of last year, and we got to 133 degrees from August 13th to August 17th on the West Coast. California has a mix that is mostly gas and renewables. And so we've seen this before, we've talked about this, and you always say, yeah, but that's California, and they're doing weird stuff over there, and you've heard that from other speakers at the conference. But I'm going to show you here in a minute that's rolling eastward. But in this example, gas, renewables were key. Because of the heat and because of the demand for electricity, natural gas prices in California on the West Coast spiked. And we thought at the time, based on the relatively low-cost natural gas prices that we've seen, that spike to $14 was pretty significant. As a result, we saw upwards of $1,500 per megawatt hour power prices, which again was extremely significant at the time and is still significant today, although we've seen a little bit higher, which we'll talk about here in a minute. And then even worse, what happened was, so you've got the high prices to deal with, and that's an issue because that leads to higher cost electricity. But the second part is the reliability. What happened is that the evening peak went up and the sun went down, and the solar generation obviously didn't perform, and you ended up with rolling blackouts in California. And so the two things that you often, obviously hear as your mission is to provide low-cost, reliable electricity. So if it's high cost and not reliable, you're obviously not hitting your goals, and that's not what we want. So I said that example is rolling east. So obviously, as you also heard over the last couple days, and I won't beat this into the ground, Texas had an extreme weather event. So it was obviously very cold in the middle part of the country. While it impacted Texas the most, you heard this morning that obviously SPP had some issues. There were some challenges in MISO South as well, and some of our members had to deal with that. So it was a widespread issue, but focusing just on Texas alone here, or the ERCOT market, ERCOT relies on a lot of natural gas, and they have relied on more and more wind generation and less coal generation. And that trend has continued here, as you can see from these bar charts. Mike Zinker said yesterday that natural gas deliverability was not an issue, which I don't totally buy. I mean, we're buying natural gas for a number of our members in SPP and ERCOT. Because of the freeze-offs of natural gas in Texas and Oklahoma, we lost more natural gas production from that cold spell than was lost from Katrina and Rita and the previous freeze-offs in 2011 and 2018. So it was a significant amount of natural gas. If we are going to rely more and more on natural gas as a primary fuel source in this new mix, we are going to have to do something to make sure that, one, we get the supply, and two, we have that price hedged out so that we don't have a financial burden even if we are able to get the supply. The other thing that Mike didn't tell you yesterday, Mike and I are friends, and he's not here, so I can talk about him, but he said it was no problem getting gas, and he talked about gas in Oklahoma. Well, gas in Oklahoma was trading $1,200 per MMBTU. Run that through a peaking plant, that's $12,000 a megawatt hour. So there are certainly concerns with relying on natural gas and not having fixed price and not having secure fuel supply, firm fuel supply, or some sort of backup in place to handle that. So we saw prices range from $400 to $1,200 per MMBTU, which is absolutely out of this world, prices that we have not seen before. And that obviously rolled through to the ERCOT market. And ERCOT's power prices were so high, and you saw these charts already, so I won't go back over them, but they were so high that ERCOT cleared more revenue in 1 week than the previous 3 years combined. So obviously they're usually a summer peaking plant, or peaking system, that's when the heat hits and that's when the prices spike. So you take all the 3 years combined, and that 1 week costs more than those 3 years combined. So that's crazy on the price side. The unfortunate part of that is, and you heard it from many of our speakers, that resulted in rolling blackouts because of lack of supply and caused damage to people's houses and businesses and unfortunately their lives and stuff. So you have that on top of that. All right. So you've got the picture from California, which our largest California client, I think, had 11 o'clock flight, so we won't talk bad about California. You got the picture rolling to Texas, and the theme is more gas and more renewables, all right? So these next three slides are the generation resource mix during that peak winter event, February 14th and February 18th, through February 18th, for SPP, MISO, and PJM. So during that time, coal provided 35% of the generation in SPP, and you heard about what prices did there. I mean, it was still $4,000 a megawatt hour at times, and they still had some issues with keeping the lights on. In MISO, it was 45%, so almost half of MISO was coal. And then in PJM, 34%, so 34.1% to be exact, I guess. So we still have a significant amount of coal generation, which is helping us move forward in this transition period that we're in. But that's going to change. We are going to continue, whether it's, you want to say it's for economics or for political reasons, or a lot of money pushing renewables, or they're teaching middle school kids that coal is terrible, and once they get old enough, they'll have a say and push for different things. Whatever the reason, I don't think it matters. I don't know, regardless of what your beliefs are, it would be hard to say that there is not a transition in place where we're going to rely on more natural gas and more renewables as we go forward. And just thinking again about John McDonald's presentation, the idea of no truck drivers and no farmers just rattles me. But that's the future. That's happening. He didn't mention we're having our first autonomous Indianapolis 500 race here in a couple months with Indy cars that are going to drive themselves around the track with no drivers in them. So, hopefully the robots can't get up here and give a 30-minute spiel, or I'm toast. I'll have to find something else to do. And then, as Mike checks his watch, making sure I'm on time. And anyway, as we go forward, there's going to be some changes. Battery deployment is going to be out there. We're going to see a big increase in batteries. 2 years ago, we said that we were starting to hear about them, and now a lot of you are experimenting with them or installing them. Distributed energy is going to be a huge change, I believe. We have been dealing with a lot of companies who, because of these issues, are putting in microgrids, putting in distributed energy resources, putting in backup generation. This has been a trend for a while, but because of the reliability or lack thereof in some areas of the country, this trend is accelerating. And in my role, fortunately, we get a lot of calls from people who want services, and so we get to talk to them about what they're doing, what they're seeing, what their customers are doing. And in addition, the G&T and the distribution co-ops are seeing this same thing happening in their service territories, and we're actually just started working with one of our G&T members on providing a service where we aggregate these distributed energy resources and offer them into the market and control them for reliability concerns. And so this, I think, is going to be a bigger piece of the picture. So, it's going to grow. I mean, we're talking to small cities and co-ops and industrial clients every day that are looking at ways to ensure that they have reliable electricity, and then how do we tie that into the rest of the grid to make that all work together. So I think that's going to be huge. I think that's going to be a topic over the next couple of years, and I think it's going to be important. Hydrogen viewed as the next major market impact. I'm not going to say a word about hydrogen. Obviously, Brad just did a fantastic job of giving us a college level course in an hour on that. What I do know is that CFC and CoBank both have asked ACES to give them information about hydrogen, which I can only assume means that their customers are asking them about hydrogen, and you are their customers. So I think that while there are challenges with it, and I don't know a whole lot about the, everything that we just read, while there are challenges of it, what I do know is, much like batteries, it's on a lot of meeting agendas and it's being discussed. So if the battery trend was any indication, that could mean that we are heading in the same sort of trajectory with hydrogen, despite the challenges. And again, you all know what a little political influence can do, and it's a hot topic right now. So that's all I'll say about that. As I finish up here, I will leave you with two things that I think that you should work on, or that you should do. Because somebody asked me after the two presentations yesterday, they said, "Yeah, but what do we do about it?" And I'm like, that's the $1 million question, right? Like Don was saying, 10 years ago, the world was totally different. 20 years ago, it's totally different. And it's going to be totally different in 10 years. And we don't know exactly what that looks like. So I'd say on one hand, kind of, keep in mind that we're in a transition. We're going from what we know to what we don't know. And I think that it's important to have a plan in place for that. And you heard about Donna talking about their plan at Hoosier Energy this morning about transitioning from obviously and I'm from Southern Indiana, so I know you retire a big coal plant that relies on local coal mines and the towns and everything. That's not an insignificant decision. But they spent, I believe she said, a year planning for the transition from the current power portfolio mix that they have in the current world they know to a new world that will likely include, as she'd mentioned, solar and wind, distributed energy, but other things like battery technology that's newer, and then something that we might not even know about. So there are people out there who are really smart working on ideas for the future that might change some of this that we're looking at. So I'd say have a plan. And we work with our members and customers to come up with those plans. A lot of you work internally with outside consultants. We don't know what the future looks like, right? So come up with a plan for ranges. And I wouldn't be afraid to say, what's it look like with some crazy far off idea of what the future grid looks like, all the way back to, we get to run this plant for 10 or 15 more years. I mean, have a range of plans, but have a plan. And that way, as that unfolds and as we change, you can kind of be prepared and walk along the path. You're not caught off. The other thing I'd say is that as we transition and as we have more renewables built, for whatever reason they get built, doesn't matter, and as we rely more on natural gas, hopefully it doesn't get banned. I don't think it will. I think it would be catastrophic if we banned fracking or anything like that. But as we rely on more natural gas, and as we retire coal, which companies are retiring coal, and as we retire nuclear, which they are retiring nuclear, we are going to see periods of greater volatility like we've seen in California, like we've seen in ERCOT, and like we've seen in SPP. And so on top of educating ourselves and our boards and our co-ops in our communities and our legal advocates and everything else that we do and that you guys do through NRECA, I think it's important to kind of keep that message out there. There are other things that you can do when managing your power supply business to mitigate those risks. So again, I said 2 years ago, because we were a low price, low volatility environment, there were a lot of people who said, doesn't matter, I'm not really concerned. Gas has gone to $10 before, and we can handle it if it does again. But what I'm saying is that gas went to $1,200, and that has provided, as many of you know, with greater challenges than just, working through it over the next month. So there are things you can do. I am also not a salesman, even though that's my title, but obviously ACES can help with that. you all are members or customers of ACES, and you know that. So don't hesitate to reach out to the quality staff we have to say, how do I mitigate some of those risks? And I know you already have after the events of February, and I know we're working on a lot of it. So I just say, be more proactive with that, and be aware that I don't think that we're in a period of low price, low volatility for the next 10 years as we see through this transition. So I will leave you with that. I would be happy to take questions, but Don told me I could wrap it up, and oh man, the last wrap-up slide's not there. Anyway, I'd be happy to take questions, but otherwise, I really do appreciate you all coming out. I appreciate you sticking around. The conference, I think, went over really well, and hopefully we will see all of you back here in 1 year, as well as hopefully those folks who are dialing in. I'm sure that Zoom and all the other online networking sites are going to be a part of our future, but hopefully we see more of you face-to-face and able to shake hands and have a meal and that sort of thing. So appreciate it. Safe travels back to wherever you're going, and I'll let it go from there.